She had chosen him when nobody thought she should. That was the part that her family could not get past, the part that her mother brought up at every dinner and her aunts discussed in the specific hushed tones of people who believe they are being discreet and are not being discreet at all. She was 31 years old and she had a master's degree in architecture and a career that was going somewhere real, and she had chosen a man who drove a second-hand pickup truck and wore work boots with dirt on them and who had never once in the 3 years she had known him mentioned anything about his future in a way that suggested the future was going to look significantly different from his present. She had chosen him anyway. She had chosen him because of who he was in every room he entered and because of the way he listened when she spoke and because he had a quality of stillness that she had spent 3 years trying to name and had finally decided was simply the quality of someone who was entirely at ease with who they were and did not require the world to confirm it. She had chosen him and she had planned the wedding and she had bought the dress and she had sent the invitations, and on the morning of the wedding she had stood in front of the mirror in the small room at the back of the church and she had felt entirely certain. And then the moment had arrived when everything the people in that room thought they knew about the man she was marrying had changed in the space of approximately 60 seconds. Not because of anything that was said at the altar. Not because of anything that was revealed in a speech. Because of something that happened in the parking lot of that church at 11:45 on a Saturday morning in June that nobody had planned and nobody had staged, and that changed the temperature of the entire day in the way that only true things change the temperature of a room when they finally surface. Stay with me. Because this story is about what we choose when we choose a person and what it means when the choice turns out to be larger than we knew. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you are new here, click on the subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now let us get into this story. Her name was Claire Hendricks and she was 31 years old and she had grown up in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, in a household that was comfortable in the specific way of households where nobody was wealthy but nobody was worrying either, where there was enough for the activities and the holidays and the college tuition fund and the specific small surpluses that communicated to everyone inside the household and outside it that things were under control. Her father was an architect, which was where her interest in the field had begun, watching him at his drafting table when she was small and understanding from early that the designed world, the buildings and the bridges and the spaces people moved through without thinking about who had thought about them, was a world that had been produced by specific human decisions, and that the people who made those decisions were doing something that mattered in ways that were not always visible but were always present. She had studied architecture at Ohio State and had gone on to a master's program at the University of Michigan and had come out of it with a position at a mid-sized firm in Columbus that did a combination of residential and commercial work, and that was building a reputation in sustainable design that Claire found genuinely interesting rather than merely professionally useful. She had met Daniel Reeves at a hardware store on a Saturday morning in March 3 years before the wedding. She had been looking for a specific type of wood filler for a small restoration project she was doing on the built-in shelving in her apartment, and she had been in the wrong aisle for approximately 4 minutes before he had appeared at the end of the aisle with a cart containing what looked like the complete inventory of a serious renovation project, and had looked at what she was holding and said that was not going to work for what she probably needed it for. She had said how did he know what she needed it for? He had said he did not, but the filler she was holding was for painted surfaces, and if she was working on stained wood she needed something different. She had said she was working on stained wood. He had said then she needed aisle 7. He had smiled, the specific brief smile of someone who is not performing warmth but simply has it, and he had turned his cart back toward whatever he had been doing. She had gone to aisle 7 and she had thought about the brief smile for approximately 3 more minutes than the situation warranted, and then she had found him in aisle 7 without planning to find him there and had said she had another question. He had answered it. They had talked for 20 minutes in aisle 7 of a hardware store about wood filler, and then about restoration work, and then about architecture, and then about the specific quality of old buildings and what they communicated about the people who had built them. He had a quality of engagement in conversation that was not common, the quality of someone who was actually listening rather than waiting for his turn, and who asked the kind of follow-up questions that only arrived if the listening was real. She had given him her number before she left the aisle. He had texted that evening. They had dinner the following Saturday. He had told her on the second date what he did. He was a contractor. He ran a small construction and renovation company with 3 employees that he had started at 26 after spending 5 years working for other contractors and learning what he wanted to do differently. The company was small and the work was steady, and he did residential renovation primarily, old houses and commercial spaces that needed serious structural attention rather than cosmetic updating. He loved the work in the way that people love work when the work is the right work for who they are, with the specific satisfaction of someone who starts a thing in the morning and can see at the end of the day what the starting has produced. He drove a second-hand pickup truck because a pickup truck was what his work required, and he had not seen a reason to spend money on something different when what he had did what he needed. He lived in a rented house on the east side of Columbus that he was renovating over time, working on it evenings and weekends, taking it apart and putting it back together correctly because that was what he did and it was what he found satisfying. He said all of this directly and without apology and without the specific inflation that people sometimes apply to their circumstances when they are in the early stages of trying to impress someone and have decided that honest inflation is the available substitute for honest disclosure. Claire had listened to all of it and had noted the absence of inflation and had found the absence more compelling than anything inflated would have been. He drove a second-hand pickup truck for 3 years of their relationship, and he wore work boots with dirt on them, and he never once mentioned his future in a way that suggested it was going to look significantly different from his present, and Claire had chosen him knowing all of this and had not experienced any of it as a problem because she understood who he was and what the work boots and the pickup truck communicated, which was not limitation but the specific choice of someone who knew what he valued and did not require the validation of things he did not value to feel settled in his own life. Her family had not understood her understanding. Her mother, whose name was Patricia and who had spent 31 years managing the household in the comfortable suburb of Columbus with the specific focused attention of someone for whom the management of things was the primary expression of love and who had therefore developed strong opinions about how things should be managed, had expressed her concerns about Daniel Reeves in the specific way of mothers who have concerns they believe they are sharing out of love and who are not entirely wrong about the love even when they are entirely wrong about the concerns. She had said he seemed like a nice man. She had said it in the tone that communicated nice man as a category that was being distinguished from the category of appropriate match. She had said Claire had worked very hard for her career and that she should think carefully about the kind of partnership that would support the career she was building. Claire had said she had thought carefully. Her mother had said she hoped so. Her father had been quieter about it, which was his way, but had said once in a conversation that he just wanted to make sure she knew what she was choosing. Claire had said yes. She had said she knew exactly what she was choosing. Her father had looked at her for a moment and had said okay and had not raised it again, which was also his way. The wedding was planned for a Saturday in June. It was not a large wedding. Claire and Daniel had both agreed that a large wedding was not what either of them wanted, that what they wanted was the people who were actually theirs in a space that was actually themselves, which had produced a guest list of 84 people and a venue that was a historic church in German Village that had a garden space attached to it for the reception and that Claire had chosen because of the quality of the light through the old windows and the specific character of the stone and the way the garden smelled in June. She had planned it with the specific attention of an architect who understood that a space communicates and that the communication of a space was the result of decisions that needed to be made deliberately. Daniel had participated in the planning with the quality of engagement he brought to everything, fully present and with genuine opinions and with the specific willingness to advocate for what he wanted and defer to what she wanted in the proportion that the specific item deserved rather than the blanket deference of someone who had decided all of it was hers to decide. They had planned it together. She had bought the dress. The invitations had gone out. The RSVPs had come back. The morning of the wedding was a Saturday morning in June with the specific quality of a June morning in Columbus when the weather has decided to cooperate, warm without being heavy, the air carrying the smell of the gardens along the brick streets of German Village. Claire was in the small room at the back of the church with her maid of honor, her college friend Kate, and her mother, who had arrived at 7 in the morning with the energy of someone who had been waiting for this day and who was going to ensure that every detail of it was what it should be. Her mother had, across the preceding months, arrived at an acceptance of Daniel Reeves that was more complete than Claire had expected and that had come from a specific source. She had gone to dinner at the house he was renovating on the east side 6 months before the wedding, which was the first time she had seen the house, and she had walked through it with the expression of someone revising an assumption in real time, because what he had done with that house, the quality of the restoration work, the structural decisions and the finished decisions, the way he had taken a house that had been poorly maintained for 30 years and was returning it to something that honored what it had been built to be, had communicated something to Patricia Hendricks that the pickup truck and the work boots had not communicated, which was the specific quality of someone who cared about doing things correctly and who had the skills to do them correctly and who did not cut corners when he was the only one who would have known. She had not said anything to Claire about the revision directly. She had said the house was beautiful. Claire had said yes. She had said she knew. Now I want to stop here and ask you something. Have you ever judged someone before you fully saw them? Have you ever looked at the surface of a person, the car they drove or the work they did or the way they dressed, and decided what you knew about them from the surface? And have you ever been in a room when that judgment was overturned by something that could not be disputed? Tell us in the comments, because what happens at 11:45 on a Saturday morning outside that church in German Village is exactly the specific experience of a surface being overturned and what is underneath the surface being more than anyone in the room had prepared for. The ceremony was scheduled for noon. By 11:30 the guests were largely seated and the church had the specific warm quality of a space filled with people who know each other and who are glad to be together for a good reason, the low hum of conversation and the occasional sound of children and the smell of the flowers that had been arranged at the ends of the pews. Daniel was in the side room with his best man, his oldest friend and business partner James Okafor, who had been with him since the early days of the company and who had the specific easy manner of someone who knew the man he was standing beside at a deep level and who was glad to be standing beside him at this particular moment. Daniel was wearing a suit that was the right suit, not expensive in a way that announced itself but made from good material and fitted correctly, the suit of someone who had made one specific good decision about a suit rather than a series of expensive decisions. He was calm in the way that Claire had always found him calm, which was the calm of someone who was where they wanted to be and was not performing the wanting. At 11:45 an unusual thing happened in the parking lot of the church. A car had been driving past on the street adjacent to the church property, one of the brick streets of German Village, and something had gone wrong with the car. It had stopped running in the specific way that cars stop running when something mechanical has failed rather than when they have run out of fuel, and the driver had managed to bring it to a stop at the curb, partially blocking the entrance to the church parking lot. There was a woman in the car and an older man in the passenger seat, and the woman was trying to understand what had happened, and the older man, who appeared to be in his 70s and who had the specific pale and slightly unfocused quality of someone who had been unwell, was becoming agitated in the way that elderly people become agitated when they are in an unfamiliar situation and the situation is not resolving quickly. Several of the wedding guests who were still arriving saw what had happened, and several of them walked past in the way that people walk past things when they have somewhere to be and the thing is adjacent to their path but not directly in it. One guest stopped and looked at the car and looked at the older man through the window and took out his phone and called what appeared to be a roadside assistance service, and then stood at a slight distance doing what he had done, which was call someone, and considered the matter addressed. Daniel came out of the side entrance of the church at 11:48 because James had told him the florist had a question about the arrangement at the altar, and the florist's contact was on Daniel's phone, and Daniel had come outside to take the call. He had come around the side of the building and had seen the stopped car and the woman standing beside it and the older man through the windshield, and he had understood in the specific way of someone who has spent years working with his hands and solving practical problems that the situation had more immediate needs than a roadside assistance call was going to address. He had gone to the car. He had spoken to the woman and understood that the engine had stopped and would not restart. He had spoken to the older man through the open window and understood that the older man was her father and that he had a heart condition, and that the combination of the heat of the stopped car and the disruption to their routine had produced in him a level of agitation and physical distress that was beyond ordinary and that needed attention now rather than when the roadside assistance arrived. He had said he was calling an ambulance. The woman had said she did not want to overreact. Daniel had looked at the man's color and the quality of his breathing and had said he was not overreacting, and had called 911 with the specific calm of someone who knows what the situation is and knows what the situation requires and is implementing the requirement without the performance of urgency that people who are frightened sometimes produce in these moments. He had stayed on the line with the dispatcher and had talked the woman through keeping her father calm, and had opened the car door to improve the air circulation, and had taken off his suit jacket and placed it carefully over the man to manage his temperature, and he had stayed exactly where he was until the ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. He had been outside for 17 minutes. The wedding was supposed to have started at noon. It was 12:05 when he came back through the side entrance and found James at the door with the specific expression of someone who has been managing a situation inside and who needs a complete explanation immediately. Daniel told him quickly. James said the ambulance had come. Daniel said yes. James said, "Is the man all right?" Daniel said he thought so. The paramedics had said his vitals were stable and they were taking him in for observation. James said good. He said, "You need to get in there." He said Claire is still in the back room and nobody has told her anything except that there is a short delay. He said the guests have been told there is a small logistical delay. He said no one in the room knows what you have been doing for the past 17 minutes. Daniel said yes. He said let us go. He picked up his suit jacket, which one of the paramedics had returned to him, and he looked at it for a moment because the suit jacket had on its sleeve a mark from where it had been placed over the older man in the car, a mark that was not going to come out before the ceremony, and he put the jacket on anyway because it was the jacket he had and the ceremony was now, and he walked into the church. Now friends, I need to stop here because I need you to understand what had happened in those 17 minutes. A man was about to be married. He was in the side room with his best man waiting for the ceremony to begin. He was in his best suit. And he left the side room, not because anyone asked him to, not because anyone would have known if he had not, and he spent 17 minutes in a parking lot with two strangers in the kind of situation that most people would have addressed by calling someone else and then walking on. And then he came back into the church with a mark on his suit jacket and got married. Think about what that tells you about who he was. Think about whether you knew anyone who would have done that. Think about whether you would have done that. Tell us in the comments right now what you think. Because what happens when the people in that church find out what the delay was about is the moment this story turns into the thing it actually is. The ceremony began at 12:10. Claire came down the aisle at 12:10 in the dress that had taken 3 appointments to find, and that was exactly right in the way that dresses are exactly right when you stop looking for what you thought you wanted and find what you actually wanted. She came down the aisle on her father's arm and she looked at Daniel at the altar and she noticed the mark on the sleeve of his jacket and she registered it and did not understand it and filed it as a question for later because the larger fact of the moment, which was that she was walking toward the person she had chosen and the choosing had been right and the room was full of the people who were theirs, was the fact that the moment contained and that she was not going to let a mark on a jacket sleeve take her attention from it. She reached him. He looked at her with the look that she had been reading for 3 years and that she could read completely, the full and present attention of someone who was entirely here and entirely glad to be here and who was not performing either of those things but simply was them. She said quietly, "What happened to your jacket?" He said he would tell her afterward. She said, "Is everyone all right?" He said yes. She said okay. The officiant began. The ceremony was what they had wanted it to be, which was honest and warm and not longer than it needed to be. The vows they had written themselves were the vows of 2 people who had been paying attention to each other for 3 years and who had taken the writing seriously as a form of honesty rather than as a performance. Daniel's vows included a line that several people in the room said afterward they were still thinking about weeks later. He said he promised to be present in the ordinary moments of their life together with the same quality of attention he brought to the important ones because he had learned that the ordinary moments were where the important ones were built and that a person who was only present for the important ones was missing the construction of everything they claimed to value. Claire sat with that line in real time and thought about the hardware store aisle and 3 years of exactly that quality of attention, and she was glad, with the specific completeness of someone who knows they have made the right decision, that she had chosen him. The reception was in the garden attached to the church. The weather held. The garden in June smelled the way the garden in June in German village smelled, and the food was good and the people were glad, and the specific warmth of a gathering of people who know each other and who are there for a good reason was present in every conversation at every table. It was during the reception, during the period when the formal structure of the event had relaxed into the more organic movement of people talking and moving between tables and finding each other across the garden, that the story of the parking lot began to circulate. The woman whose father had been taken to the hospital had come back. She had come back because after the ambulance had taken her father and she had followed in a taxi and had sat with him for an hour while he was assessed and had been told by the doctor that he was stable and that the episode had been managed quickly enough that there was no significant cardiac event and that the quick response of the person who had called the ambulance and kept him calm and managed his temperature in the car had been specifically noted as a factor in the good outcome. She had asked her father if there was anything he wanted and her father had said he wanted to thank the young man in the suit. She had found out from the church that the young man in the suit was the groom and that the wedding was still happening, and she had come back to the garden reception because her father had asked her to thank him and because she was not the kind of person who did not do what her father asked when her father's request was this specific and this reasonable. She found James Okafor first because James was the person closest to the entrance of the garden, and she said she was looking for the groom, and James looked at her and understood immediately who she was and said, "Come with me." He brought her to Daniel and Claire, who were at a table near the center of the garden with Claire's parents and Daniel's mother, who had driven from Cincinnati the previous day and who was a small and sharp-eyed woman named Margaret who had raised Daniel alone from the age of 7 when his father had left, and who had the specific quality of someone who has managed what is required of her without complaint for long enough that the managing has become invisible and only the results are visible. The woman introduced herself. She said her name was Anna and she said she needed to tell them something. She said her father was stable and was going to be fine. She said the doctor had told her that the response of the person who had called the ambulance and managed the situation in the car had been a factor in the outcome. She said her father had specifically asked her to come back and to thank the man who had done those things. She looked at Daniel. She said, I understand you were supposed to be getting married. He said yes. She said, and you stopped. He said yes. She said, for 17 minutes. He said, give or take. She said she did not have words for what she wanted to say and she was going to try anyway. She said her father was 81 years old and had a heart condition and had been having a hard year and was the most important person in her life, and she had been sitting in a stopped car in June heat watching him deteriorate, and the people who had walked past had been the specific experience of being invisible when visibility was what was needed, and then a man in a suit had come around the corner of a church and had seen what was happening and had made the call and had stayed and had taken off his jacket and put it over her father and had talked to her calmly enough that she could breathe, and she had held her father's hand until the ambulance came. She said she had looked at the man's suit and had understood that he was somewhere he was supposed to be, and she had not known that somewhere was his own wedding until afterward. She said she wanted to say thank you. She said it was insufficient. She said she knew it was insufficient and she was saying it anyway because it was what she had. The garden was not entirely quiet when she said all of this, but it was quiet enough that the people at the surrounding tables heard most of what was said, and the people at those tables communicated it to the people at the tables adjacent to them in the specific rapid organic way that information moves through a gathering of people who are connected to each other and who have all just understood something at the same time. Claire's mother Patricia heard the whole thing because she was sitting directly at the table. She sat with it. She sat with the specific quality of a woman who has been holding a set of assumptions about a person for 3 years and who is watching those assumptions be revised by something that cannot be argued with and that is not performable, and that is in fact the most clear and direct expression of character that she had encountered in a very long time, which was that when nobody was watching and something needed to be done, the man she had been concerned about her daughter choosing had done it. Without hesitation and without telling anyone, and had come back into the church and gotten married with a mark on his jacket and had not mentioned it once. She looked at her daughter. Claire was looking at Daniel. Patricia looked at Daniel. He was looking at Anna with the same quality of attention he brought to everything, and saying he was glad her father was all right and that he hoped his recovery was smooth and that she should not worry about the thank you because the thank you was not necessary. Anna said it was necessary to her. He said then he accepted it and was glad she had come back. Anna left. The garden resumed its warmth. Claire sat beside Daniel and she said so. He said yes. She said 17 minutes. He said approximately. She said you took off your jacket. He said he did not want him to get overheated. She said your jacket has a mark on it now. He said yes. She said you got married with a mark on your jacket and did not say anything. He said the wedding was not about the jacket. She looked at him for a long moment. She said she had been right about him from the beginning. He said he hoped so. She said she had said it in the hardware store aisle, when she was in aisle 7 looking at wood filler. She had said to herself that there was something about this person and she did not know what it was yet, but it was real. He said what had she said to herself exactly? She said she had said that person knows what he is doing and he is not making a performance of it, and those two things together are rarer than people think. He said that was a specific thought for a hardware store aisle. She said she was an architect. She said she noticed how things were built. He smiled. She put her hand over his on the table. The garden continued around them, and the June afternoon was doing what June afternoons in German village did when the weather cooperated and the flowers smelled the way they smelled and the people at the tables were glad, and the specific warmth of a day that had been exactly what it needed to be was present in everything. Claire's father came to Daniel later in the afternoon, during the period when the reception was settling into the long easy conversation of its final hours. He found him at the drinks table and he stood beside him and poured himself something, and he said he had a thing he wanted to say. Daniel said go ahead. Her father said his name was Robert, and he said he had spent 3 years being the father who was not entirely sure about Claire's choice, and he wanted Daniel to know that he was aware of that and that today had not been the thing that resolved his uncertainty, that he had resolved his uncertainty some time before today, and that the resolving had come from watching who Daniel was with his daughter across 3 years, the quality of his attention and the consistency of it and the way Claire was when she was with him, which was the fully herself version of Claire rather than any other version, and which was the version that Robert had always wanted to see his daughter be. He said he was telling Daniel this because he had not said it before and he should have said it before today, and he wanted to say it directly rather than through a toast or through his daughter. He said welcome to the family. He said he meant it. Daniel put his drink down and shook Robert's hand and held it for a moment and said thank you and said he would take care of her. Robert said he knew. He said he had known for a while. He said today just confirmed some things that he had already come to understand were true. Daniel said what things? Robert said that the quality of a person showed most clearly in what they did when nobody was watching and that he had been watching, for 3 years, in the way that fathers watch the people their daughters choose, and that what he had been watching was a person who was entirely consistent between the watched and the unwatched version of himself, and that this was the thing he had most wanted to find and had eventually found, and he was glad. Daniel said he appreciated that more than he could properly say. Robert said he knew. He said that was the other thing about him that he appreciated. He said he did not oversell things. He said it was a quality that was becoming rarer than it should be. Margaret, Daniel's mother, found Claire near the end of the evening, when the garden lights had come on and the dinner had been cleared and the remaining guests were in the easy and unhurried conversation of people who do not want the evening to end. Margaret was small and sharp-eyed and had the specific manner of a woman who had said exactly what she meant for 68 years and who had no interest in changing that practice. She stood next to Claire and looked at the garden and said she wanted to tell her something about her son. Claire said please. Margaret said she had raised Daniel alone from the age of 7 and she had raised him on what she made as a home health aid and she had raised him to understand 2 things. She said the first thing was that the quality of what you built was the measure of your character and that this applied to the houses he worked on and to the relationships he was in and to the way he treated the people around him in the ordinary moments of their shared life, and there was no exception to the application. She said the second thing was that a person who needed the world to know what they had done was a person who did not fully believe in the value of what they had done, and that the people whose doing was most real were usually the people who did it and moved on. She said she was telling Claire this because today had been an example of both things and she wanted Claire to know that what she had seen today was not an exception. She said it was who he was every day in the 31 years she had known him, and that Claire was going to see it every day for the rest of their shared life, and that she hoped she knew what she had chosen. Claire said yes. She said she had always known what she had chosen. She said she had just not known the full scale of it yet. Margaret said yes. She said that was how it worked with the real ones. She said the full scale revealed itself over time, and it always revealed upward rather than downward, and that upward was the direction that mattered. Daniel and Claire left the reception at 10 in the evening, after the last guests had said their goodbyes and the garden had been released back to the June night. They drove in Daniel's pickup truck, because it was his truck and it was what he had, and Claire sat in the passenger seat of a second-hand pickup truck in her wedding dress, and she looked out at the Columbus streets at 10 in the evening in June, and she thought about a hardware store aisle and 3 years and a man who had come around the corner of a church in his best suit and had made a phone call and stayed and had put his jacket over a stranger and had come back inside and gotten married. With a mark on his sleeve and had not told anyone. She thought about what her father had said about the watched and unwatched versions of a person. She thought about the line in Daniel's vows about being present in the ordinary moments with the same quality of attention he brought to the important ones. She thought about all of it, and she looked at the man driving the truck, and she thought that she had been right in the hardware store aisle, and she had been right every day since, and she was going to continue being right for a very long time, and that knowing you are right about the most important choice of your life with the completeness that she knew it was the specific condition that she had hoped to find and had not been certain she would find and had found. She said nothing. He drove. The city went past the windows. The evening was warm and the June night was doing what June nights in Columbus did when everything was as it should be. She put her hand on his on the gearshift. He turned his palm up and held her hand. That was all. It was enough. The man that nobody thought she should have chosen turned out to be exactly who she had always known he was. The mark on the jacket sleeve of his wedding suit turned out to be the most true thing that anybody who attended that wedding had seen in a very long time. And the woman who had chosen him when nobody thought she should had understood, from a hardware store aisle at 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning in March, that the quality of a person was visible in the ordinary moments if you were paying the right kind of attention, and that she was paying the right kind of attention, and that what she was seeing was real. She had been right. The day had confirmed it in a parking lot at 11:45 in the specific way that true things confirm themselves when the conditions that reveal them arrive without announcement and without design. And the 60 seconds in which everything the people in that church thought they knew about the man being married had not changed anything that was actually true. It had simply made the truth visible to the people who had not yet been paying the right kind of attention. The truth had been there the whole time. In the hardware store aisle. In the second-hand pickup truck. In the work boots with the dirt on them. In the 3 years of exactly the quality of presents he had promised at the altar. It had been there. It had just been waiting for a parking lot in June to show everyone else what Claire Hendricks had already known. If this story reached you tonight in the place where stories reach you when they are real, please share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Like this video and subscribe to our channel for powerful emotional and true stories every single week. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from, and tell us this: have you ever chosen someone that the people around you did not understand you choosing? And were you right? Tell us in the comments. We want to hear from you. We read every single one. And if you think this story was powerful, wait until you hear what happened when a janitor turned down $1 million offer and changed a CEO's life forever. You do not want to miss that one. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next story.